Hello, I'm York County Administrator Neil Morgan. Today we're at Tabb Library in York County and we're joined by Sheila Knoll, 2017 Chairman of the York County Board of Supervisors. We're going to have a conversation with Sheila, and thank you for being here, talking about your experience leading the county and the Board of Supervisors during this eventful year of 2017. And let me start by just sort of asking you a general question, Sheila. Thinking back on 2017 and your time as chairman, what are some of the bigger issues that you feel like the York County Board has been dealing with?
Well, the biggest issue is always going to be the budget, and the needs of the county are greater than the resources that the county has. So that's always the problem, and it's trying to make decisions between the needs and not necessarily the wants. And I know that this year we really worked very hard to be able to support the school system, because we knew that even though we have supported the school system all the way through the recession and the downturn in the economy, there's still more that we could do. And we felt that, and this time we felt that we had a closer relationship and a better understanding. But that, of course, took money. So that's something that we always look at, and that's why the budget is very, very important. It is the biggest job, I believe, that the Board of Supervisors handles yearly.
And I would have to say it's probably one of the most important parts of my job as well. It's interesting that you mentioned schools, because the board has established 6 strategic priorities, and one of those does relate to education.
Yes.
So one of the things that we're doing now that may be a little different than 2 or 3 years ago was, as we think about our budget, we try to frame where we put resources related to those strategic priorities.
Yeah. And I have to tell you that I think we all were quite pleased that we've memorialized the date that we have our retreat every year in the third week of January, I believe. And it was at the retreat where we lined up and we decided that what our priorities were going to be. And you mentioned education was a very big priority. I think you talk about public safety, and yes, we have to keep the county safe. And so what we recognized that we needed to add more deputies to the Sheriff's Department. We recognized that we needed upgrades, for example, in the way the monitoring and the cameras that they have, that they're wearing now.
The technology.
The technology. Technology is a great big, I think that is one of the biggest things that we've been able to do in this past year. And I'm very, very proud and pleased of the fact that we've been able to do that. But that was because we focused in on what priorities were going to be, and then you all went forward and acted on them.
Well, just to finish the point on public safety, and then I would like to talk about technology a little bit more. So to be clear, in the budget year that you presided over as chairman, and the board unanimously supported, we funded 2 additional sheriff's deputies.
That's right.
In addition to some things that the sheriff did to see that we actually have more patrol units on the street than we did in prior years. We also ended up funding 5 new fire and life safety positions.
That's true.
And it was a little bit hard to explain, because we tried to get a grant, and we were not successful in the grant, but even so we were able to fund 5 positions, and
yes.
I would imagine I'll be recommending a similar strategy next year. Under state law, uniformed public safety people can be provided with one of 2 types of pension benefits.
Yes.
And many of our neighboring communities, like Newport News and Poquoson and Williamsburg, offer a higher pension benefit.
That's right.
For the same positions. And the truth is, we're in a labor market where our fire personnel, the people that work for us now and the people we're trying to recruit, and our sheriff's personnel, they can choose to work for York County, they can choose to stay in York County, or they can go to work for one of our neighbors. And so with the board support, we were able to increase our pension benefit so that we're now on an even playing field with our neighbors. And when you think about staffing,
Yes.
You know,
Well, we want retention is very, very important.
retention and recruiting,
And recruiting.
and really across the board in county government, we don't do anything without people. And
That's our biggest resource.
It is, and so you know, you've heard me say a great organization involves three things: great people, a plan of action, and the tools to do the job. So kind of circling back to that budget conversation, I think everything we did in this year's budget hit one of those three aspects
Yes.
of building a sustainable organization. You want to talk about technology a little bit now?
Oh, yes, talk about technology.
So you queued me up on that a little bit. So one of our other strategic priorities has to do with effective communication.
And that's a biggie, because we really have to bring the public in and show them what we're doing. The transparency is very, very important, and we do that through communications and improved communications. And I've got to tell you that I'm really pleased at the way we have been moving forward with that in this past year.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. It kind of relates to technology. Of course, it's more than just technology.
Of course.
You know, I think the county's always, as far as I know, always endeavored to be transparent and open with citizens, but it's probably fair to say we weren't keeping up with all the trends in how, in the modern world, people get their information. And so we've tried to invest in things that depending on your preference, whether you want to keep up by watching TV,
So many different things
whether you
now.
want to go to our website, or whether you receive your information from Twitter or Facebook,
That's right.
that we are out there in all those platforms providing information. And some of that does involve investments in technology. In addition to sort of our basic computer backbone, we've built a new website, which we're very proud of,
That's right.
and we rolled out this summer. But there's a lot of other communications that involves technology.
But when I talked about transparency, we have always, as you said, been as transparent as we possibly could be, but we had the limitations, and that's what I meant by the greater transparency, the ability to be more transparent that technology is giving us right now.
And just one tangible example, the weekly correspondence package.
Oh, yes.
One of the things we do now is every week we send the board sort of a compilation of all the different communications that we've had during the week, and then we post that on the website. So any citizen that's interested doesn't have to ask, doesn't have to FOIA us, doesn't have to call someone.
right.
All they have to do is go to our new website, click on Board of Supervisors, and read all the things that the staff is sharing with the board.
And I think the staff is sharing more and more with the board, which has made the board even more engaged. Neil, one of the things that we did at the retreat, which was, I thought, very, very important, was to give you the authority to move forward with our priorities for the year. One of those, of course, the biggie, is technology. And I wish you'd explain a little bit more what you all have been able to accomplish during this time.
Well, I agree it was important, and you know, it had been on the county's radar screen for some years.
Oh, yes.
That particularly the financial accounting system needed to be modernized, but the board basically said, hurry up and get it done.
Yes.
And so in January of 2017, we actually approved a contract with a big government software company called Tyler to implement what is called the Munis system. It is a financial accounting system based on a modern technical platform. Now, I can't pretend to understand all the aspects of it, but in terms of what folks need to understand about it, the first phase, which we're actively working on now and which will go live in the summer of 2018, is essentially the accounting module. So the way we pay bills, accounts receivable, accounts payable, the way we do payroll, all of those core accounting functions, as well as all of our purchasing functions will go to this new system. It has all kinds of implications for how vendors and employees relate to the county's finances. It creates a lot of efficiencies. It eliminates a lot of duplication. It shifts staff from people that are doing double and triple entry of spreadsheets with the risk of error and some waste of time. It converts them into folks that are doing analysis and looking at trends, being able to pull reports. So that's the first phase, which is gigantic because—
How many phases do we have?
Well, there's ultimately going to be 3.
Right.
And arguably this is the most critical
Right.
because these are the core financial systems of the county. When the board says,
We
county
want a report.
administrator, you
We
know,
can get one.
how are we doing?
Yes.
These are the core finances, and while we're transitioning to the new one, we have to keep the old one running. The second phase, a major piece of it, is going to be what's called the HR module, the personnel module.
Okay.
And this will mean that we'll be going to a system like most modern organizations now have, where, for example, you have employee self-serve information. You can go onto the internet and you can find out what your deductions are, what your tax withholdings are, things like that that are currently much more convoluted and difficult than they would need to be. The third phase is what is called the taxation module, which would actually involve the treasurer and the commissioner. And our thought is we hold that piece off until last, and that's—
Why?
Because we feel like getting the basic accounting part in place,
Okay.
demonstrating that it works, is critical to do first. And HR as the second module is important because it relates to, for example, payroll.
That's important.
And another thing that I know you're aware of, but folks ought to be aware of, is this is a great example of shared services. The York County School Division is fully involved with us in the transition, and in particular, the financial accounting module and the HR module will also impact them. And one other aspect to all that, which is less discussed but arguably just as important, you know, we were talking before about staff recruitment and retention. It's kind of hard to recruit technical staff to come work on a 30-year-old system.
They're going backwards.
And who would want to learn something that's sort of going away?
That's right.
So as part of the new system, it has the additional advantage of being a modern system that our staff can learn how to use and will be a competitive skill for them as they develop their talents into the future.
That's good. That's good. That's very good. I'm glad that you explained it because it's so much to absorb at one time. So I think we need to talk about it as we go through the phases and reiterate what we have done and where we're going. Because I think people would get a greater appreciation of all the work that goes into changing from an old system to a new system.
Well, and one of the things we try to do, as you know, we've had a couple of work session briefings to give you updates, and that might be something that the citizens should be aware of, because if you are interested in the details, we do give periodic updates, and those can be expected to continue. The real fun for the staff is going to be around July 1st, 2018, when we plan to switch
from one
from
to
the
the
old
other
to the
to
new.
see
And
whether
there'll be
really
a lot of nervous people right about then. So,
I think
but
so.
I'm sure we'll get it done.
I'm sure they're excited about it too, because I think we're excited about the fact that we're moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's so important.
I agree. Something else that I thought you'd probably want to talk about is some of the things that the Board of Supervisors, you and your fellow supervisors, do that maybe aren't obvious to the citizens. And you know, we're talking about 2017, but it would really apply in 2016 or 2018.
Right.
You tend to be seen at those board meetings,
That's right.
but talk about some of the other things you guys are involved in.
Well, actually, you know, there are many boards and commissions that are not just in York County, but are regional boards and commissions. And every board member serves on several different boards. So just because you see us at our board meetings twice a month, that doesn't mean that's all our work. And getting out into the community, attending nonprofit organizations and meetings, being able to thank people for what they do and be the face of York County is very important.
Well, as chair, you also have certain additional duties that aren't necessarily always obvious.
I'm ready, I can call to represent the county wherever I'm needed.
And you know, a lot of those organizations you mentioned are things that York County makes significant financial
that's right.
contributions to. So it's partly, a lot of folks don't realize, probably about 10% of our budget we deliver services through regional organizations, and some of those ones you mentioned are significant from a expenditure standpoint.
And they allow us to influence some of the decisions that are made by these organizations and to best represent the needs of our county.
And we, you know, we tend to talk about the county somewhat in isolation from the region, and you know, the way business is conducted at meetings and things that we vote on, but on the board, on the board level, you see that, you know, whether it's animal services, incarceration, utilities.
The regional jail, of course, is what you serve on.
Yeah, there's so many services and so many things about the quality of life in York County require us to engage with our neighbors, and that's a big part of what you guys do. Sheila, we've covered a lot of ground, and let's take a break. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you to think about some of your most memorable moments as chair during 2017.
I think that's a good idea.
Welcome back. We're having a conversation with Sheila Knoll, 2017 Chairman of the York County Board of Supervisors. When we left you, Sheila, we said that I was going to ask you to think about some of the most meaningful things you did during 2017 as chair.
You're talking about meaningful and fun things that I've been able to do.
Okay, or whatever.
I mean, one of the fun things that I did, and I'm going to ask you to look it up because all I can remember is SWIFT. And it was tasting water that had been reprocessed and cleaned so that it was actually drinking water. And
okay, so you're talking about the Sustainable Water Initiative for Tomorrow, SWIFT, which is a program by the Hampton Roads Sanitation District.
That's exactly right. And what's so important about that is because our aquifers are getting lower, and what they're planning to do is to inject this clean water that is drinkable back into the aquifers and raise the amount of water that we have in them, and it's sustainable for the future.
What's really cool about that is, so it's a higher level of treatment of sewage.
That's right. That's right.
And
the gray water, the brown water, whatever it is,
the science has now been
clean
perfected, but somebody had to be the first person to show folks that it really worked, and that was you.
I got to taste it
because it was at their plant in York County.
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's memorable. The first person in Hampton Roads to drink highly treated
and I'm still standing here
water.
and I'm still smiling about it. So you know that the water is great for you all to try sometime. But that was the first thing that I ended up doing as chairman of the board. But I've done so many other things. Ribbon cuttings have been wonderful. These new small businesses, entrepreneurial businesses that are starting in the county. And you know, the county's also recently, I was so proud of the fact that WYCG gave them an outstanding award for their home business educational program that they have. It's not only from VACO, the Virginia Association of Counties, but also we've got national awards for that as well. And we also got a national awards, didn't we, for the technology and what we've been able to do?
Yes, we were acknowledged as one of the top 10 local government technology operations for communities of our size.
Yes,
And
150,000 and less.
The fire department also got a VACO award. But the home-based business one that you mentioned, that was the top award for the state.
Mm-hmm.
And as chair, you got to
yes.
you got to get the kudos.
That's right. And you know what? That's another thing. Thankful to be able to do is to give awards out to our citizens, our volunteers, and give pins to our employees. That's a fun part of the job, but that's a rewarding part of that job, because these are people that make York County what it truly is. Whether they've been with the county 20, 30, 40 years, volunteers that have put in so many hours. And I was really so happy to see how many volunteers turned up for the volunteer luncheon that the county puts on, because believe me, I mean, it's really remarkable when you understand that the hours that they contribute almost equals to about 25 employees, and it's well over $1 million in money saved for our citizens.
So I believe that York County is somewhat unique in the volume and the quality of the volunteers we have. And in terms of recognizing folks like that, as well as employees, you know, I've come to realize over the years how really important that is. It's a symbolic activity,
yes,
but it means a lot to folks.
Yes.
And as chair, that's kind of your prerogative, yes, to show the love, I guess.
One of the things we said moving around all the years that we did is that the people make the place, and the people make York County, and they need to be thanked for it, because it's a marvelous place to be. And sometimes we forget in our bustling lives to say thank you to people. And I think that's one of the good things that the county's always done, and I think that's great. Also, I love the parades and the people that turn out for the parades. The 4th of July parade was great. It was up on Main Street, and then
I know that was important to you.
That was very important to me, because I was asked about that for many years, and I have to thank the volunteers who took it over, because we used to have a committee do it, and now we have volunteers doing it.
If we can only figure out a way to get some high school bands
that's
for the summer
that's
parade.
always a hard time. Well, I don't know. I think maybe we could try to put a band together and have a mixed band.
Maybe that's an objective for
something
next
like
year.
that. But that's very, very important. And of course, Yorktown Day is a signature event. Now, York County does not put it on. It's put on by the Park Service, but we participate.
It's a team effort.
It's a team effort. Our staff works very hard on that, and I think, you know, the town is glistening. It's everything has been trimmed, and everything is so neat. And the people who come here tend to come back year after year for it. It means a great deal to them. And hopefully they spend some money here while they're there, because it is a tourism attraction as well. And tourism is very, very important to our area.
So some of those events, the nice thing is it's both a tradition for, yes, those of us who live here, but it's also of interest to, that's visitors, right, and it's nice when you can sort of, yeah, achieve both of those purposes. And I know you wouldn't want to leave out the traditional Christmas celebrations.
I was just going to get to that.
Oh, okay.
We always look forward to that, because that's for the children. And you know, we have families here, and we have older people here, and we try to offer something for everybody. And the library, of course, is an excellent source for everybody. We have a lot of programs here in the library for the young people, because we want to get them hooked on reading at an early age, so they continue to support and continue to learn. And the older people really benefit by the senior center. And we have marvelous programs there. It's a continual learning process, and they continue to have programs for them. And that's part of our lifelong learning. That's one of our priorities also when we talk about education. It's not just education for the staff, and it's not just education for the students, but it's education for everybody.
So listening to you, you know, when we started this segment, we were talking about, you know, specific things that were memorable to you as chair. But I processing what you're saying, I think part of what your answer is, as chair, you really get to share in the pride of
Yes.
some of these things that make York
Very
County a special
definitely.
place. And we all do,
Very
but as chair, you kind of get
very
an
definitely.
extra,
Yes,
an
I
extra
do.
dose.
Yes, I do. And I've enjoyed the marketplace, and I've enjoyed all the activities down on the riverfront. I'm very grateful that I have the opportunity to represent York County, because York County is, as I said, a very special place.
So Sheila, you know, one of the things that makes my job a pleasant experience is the nature of our board.
Mm-hmm.
We have 5 elected officials, and it has been my experience that by and large, they work as a team. They think about what's in the interest of the county. They're civil to each other, and they're civil to the staff and the citizens. And that means a lot, you know, from the perspective of the professional staff person.
Well, from our point of view, I have to say that we appreciate what you all are trying to do for the county, because we're all in this together. Some of us have been on the board a long time, and some of us have come recently to the board. But regardless of that, we listen to each other and we learn from each other. And even though we have different personalities or different agendas, when we try to work on an issue for the county, we try to be as objective as we can possibly be and not let our agendas affect the decision, because the actions that we take affect how the county is going to move forward. It has been a very rewarding relationship that we all have had over the years. Neil, you know, when we started this conversation, we touched on the budget, and I said that the budget is one of the most important things that the board has to do. That is our biggest job.
Sure.
Would you mind going through some of the particulars of this past year's budget, and perhaps where we might be going for next year?
Yeah, so you know, we did have a 4.5-cent real estate tax increase in last year's budget. Just put that right out there, and why we did that was to accomplish several important priorities. You know, we mentioned full funding of the school budget. Mm-hmm. We mentioned additional staffing in particular for public safety, mm-hmm. and the ability to deliver the improved public safety pension, consistent with what our neighbors mm-hmm. provide. And another thing that we did in that budget, and will continue to be important in the future, is funding the capital budget at a sustainable
yes,
level.
That's right.
You all have been talking about that for years. I remember mm-hmm. watching some of your meetings right as I was coming to work here, the concern that there were all these pent-up capital needs. And I feel like in the budget year we're in, the one that we passed in the spring of 2017, we really made some significant progress in being able to fund the long-term capital projects that this community is going to need. That's still a challenge.
It'll be a challenge.
But if you roll that into your question about, well, what does it look like for fiscal year 2019, the budget that I'll be recommending in the winter of 2018 mm-hmm. and the board will be considering in the spring, I would have to tell you that all of the same priorities that informed the last budget are going to inform
sure.
that budget, because of course part of that's our strategic priorities mm-hmm. and part of it's the obvious but probably worth restating. We're gonna do the best we can to support our public schools at a high level. Mm-hmm. We got to say, folks, don't forget the state's supposed to be doing their part, and they really haven't been. But regardless of what the state does, we're going to do the best we can mm-hmm. for the schools. We're going to continue to make public safety a priority. That is, other than schools, by far the largest thing that we spend money on. Mm-hmm. I would imagine, I'm sure that my recommended budget next year that will come to you all will have a continued focus on public safety. Mm-hmm. And right-sizing the capital budget. There's a relationship between the operating budget and the capital right. budget, and we're making progress, but the community over the last 20 years, particularly with the Great Recession, has allowed our facilities to get sort of dated.
That's always been something that I've been worried about.
And so both on the school side and on the county side, we are going to have to continue to make a plan. It won't all hit at one time, but to have a plan to invest in facilities ranging from schools to libraries and fire stations, but also to sheriff, public works, registrar,
That's right.
other things.
We've just had a space study because we recognize that, and I think, you know, moving forward, that'll be part of your CIP.
Right. So that's a long way of saying, what am I going to be thinking about in this year's budget, and what's the board going to be looking at? Schools, public safety, and infrastructure.
That's what we need to look at.
You know, of course, the staff and I will be presenting detailed information over the winter in work sessions and written documents, and there'll be public information, and that'll be before you guys in March.
Well, thank you, Neil. I'm looking forward to that, but I'm looking backwards and thinking what a very good year that we've had in 2017. And I thank the staff and I thank my fellow board members for the opportunity to serve.
And it's been a great year working with you, Sheila.
Thank you, Neil.
And thank you for joining us today with our conversation with Chairman Sheila Knoll.